Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start. We're going to have quite a few parliamentarians joining us throughout the evening, so some of them have to leave early. So I'm going to start immediately to give the opportunity to those who are here now to say a few words and answer any questions that you may have. So, honourable members of Parliament, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, it really gives me great pleasure to be able to welcome amongst us this evening a good number of parliamentary friends, many of whom have been long-standing friends of Cyprus and have done a lot for the cause of Cyprus in this country for many, many years. As President of the Federation, I well appreciate the work that they do here at the House of Commons. Our community appreciates their contribution, and I want to take this opportunity to thank them on behalf of the Federation, on behalf of the community in the United Kingdom, for all their important work which benefits Cyprus as well as our community. I want to extend my special thanks to our parliamentary sponsors of this event, and in particular to thank our good friend Alan Meale for arranging for this venue to be made available to us. In the nearly 35 years since the tragic events which led to the enforced division of Cyprus, countless words have been spoken in the House of Commons and in Parliament here in the UK about the Cyprus problem. Throughout this long period, the Cypriot people have shown a lot of determination, that their will and their faith in justice and international law have been tested as never before. For no rational or objective person can be in any doubt that Turkey's legacy since its invasion of the island in 1974 is anything other than unjust. The injustices suffered are well known and documented, and it is not my intention tonight to recount these at any length. Nor can there be any question that the division of Cyprus represents a tragic failure of leadership by the international community, the failure to hold Turkey to account for its naked use of force and its continuing disregard for the rule of law. But we have gathered in this historic parliament tonight under a ray of hope, a hope that has cut across the long shadow of the Turkish invasion and occupation. The hope of the 20 meetings so far held between President Christofias and the Turkish Cypriot leader, Mr. Talat. The hope that Cyprus can at long last be restored to unity. The hope that the enduring power of the ideals of liberty and democracy, which are so vividly symbolized by this place, can flourish once again in this long-suffering island. The great task now before us is to do all in our power to ensure that the path to peace, freedom and justice, which has now opened in Cyprus, is not hindered or obstructed. This is the purpose that has brought us here tonight. We have come to ask you, our friends in the House of Commons, in Parliament, to resolve to use all your invaluable influence in this place, so that Turkey finally meets its obligations in Cyprus, so that the ray of hope under which we meet tonight is not extinguished, but multiplies, so that justice can finally prevail over the false notion that might makes right, and so that the people of a small but proud island are no longer treated as if they are somehow less deserving of their human rights because they are not big in numbers or do not have the power of vast armies or the advantage of great territory. Thank you for listening to me. I will end there, and I will now give the opportunity to our friends in Parliament to say a few words. And I would like to ask Sir Gerald Kaufman to begin, because I know he has to leave early. Gerald Kaufman.
Mr. President, thank you very much for inviting me and my colleagues here this evening at this extremely well-attended meeting, and I'm very glad indeed to be a co-sponsor of it. I represented the United Kingdom Parliament at a hearing in the United Nations at the end of November, and the issue that we were dealing with was unresolved problems of the world. And I listed the Cyprus issue as one of the prime unresolved problems which have been allowed to continue for far too long. I have to say that the government of which I was then a member, the Labour government in 1974, mishandled the Turkish invasion of Cyprus, did not react as strongly as it ought to have done. And the problem is that in these 35 years, because we are in August approaching the 35th anniversary, we are faced with a fait accompli. We had a situation in which there was a kind of de facto recognition by the international community of the Turkish presence in Cyprus, holding 37% of a neighbouring state. And indeed, I remember very well indeed taking the view that if we did not stand on this, there was no point in standing on anything. We went through a very bad period, and that bad period, I have criticised my own government, that bad period took place during the previous Conservative government, when Malcolm Rifkind was Foreign Secretary. I heard him at the dispatch box say that there could be no question of Cyprus becoming a member of the European Union until the question was resolved. When our government came to office, we reversed that, and we supported the entry of Cyprus as a member of the European Union, and of course Cyprus is indeed here today, a member of the European Union, a member of the Commonwealth as well. And it's very, very important indeed that we look at that from this point of view. I remember when I first went to Cyprus very, very many years ago and travelled all over the island to Larnaca and Famagusta and Kyrenia freely with no problems. And now, of course, the island is divided and there are huge changes in the structure of the island. It's a curious fact that divided Cyprus, divided sovereign Cyprus, is a prosperous country, a prosperous member of the European Union, very much a destination for tourists from Germany and other countries looking for the sun. It's also a fact which is very sad that the Turkish Cypriots in the north of Cyprus are living in, certainly comparatively, deprivation because of the fact that nobody except Turkey recognises northern Cyprus, and there is not the construction, there is not the economic development there. I have, on visits to Cyprus, always made a point of going to the north. I've always made a point of meeting Turkish Cypriot trade unionists, and this situation is not of their creation. This situation is of the creation of the Turkish government. Yes, of course, there were errors at the time of the Turkish invasion, and the Turks were able to use that as an excuse for their invasion. But there can be no excuse for invading another sovereign country, breaking international law, and occupying it. I heard, I won't waste the time of the meeting here this evening, but I heard some very, very sad, semi-racist stories about the attitude of the Turkish Cypriots to the Anatolians who have been shipped in by Turkey into northern Cyprus. And one must not take the view that the Turkish Cypriots welcome the presence of the Turkish soldiers. There is no reason whatsoever to believe that they want that. There is no reason whatever to believe that they want northern Cyprus to be a tax haven for people who are not always on the right side of the law. My own view is very, very simple. My government, and I am an almost sickeningly loyal supporter of my government, takes the view that it is desirable for Turkey to become a member of the European Union and puts that very high on its agenda. I take the view that I have absolutely no objection whatsoever to Turkey becoming a member of the European Union, provided that Turkey abides by international law, and also provided that Turkey, something we don't discuss in relation to the Cyprus predicament, provided that Turkey observes the elements of human rights in its own in its own country. And we have documentation after documentation, right from my friend Alan Parker's film Midnight Express. We have documentation after documentation over the years of the abuse of human rights of Turks in Turkey. So let's be clear about this, certainly as I am concerned. I have no constituency interest in Cyprus. I think I've got one Greek Cypriot restaurant, which is a very nice restaurant, but I am not here tonight because I have large numbers of Greek Cypriots, or for that matter Turkish Cypriots, in my constituency in Manchester. I'm here because I believe that Cyprus for the international community is unfinished business. We have now had Barack Obama as President of the United States for several weeks, and he has a lot on his agenda. But what is essential from President Obama, and I hope that these will be issues which our Prime Minister will have been discussing with President Obama in his visit to Washington this week. There is a kind of fantasy about the reliability of Turkey to NATO and the Western Alliance. There will be controversy in this room, as there's controversy in the entire country, about the rights and wrongs of the invasion of Iraq. What's for sure is that when Turkish help was needed in that, Turkey stood aside. So it's an ally very much on its own terms. And I believe that it is absolutely essential that the Cyprus issue be pushed to the top of the international agenda, not simply for the sakes of the displaced Cypriots, not simply for the sake of the looted churches, but because of the fact that this is an outrage to international law. And I very much hope that whatever the attitude of the United Kingdom government, Greece and Cyprus will veto Turkish membership of the European Union until Turkey gets out of Cyprus. That's our objective as democratic, united Cyprus with Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots living together in harmony. Let's work for that, and let this meeting be part of our working for that.
Thank you very much, Gerald.
for those very kind words. I know you have been a long-standing friend of Cyprus and a principled friend of Cyprus, and we're grateful to you for that. I know that Roger Gale is very keen to, he needs to chair a meeting near here, so you would like to speak next, so please, Roger, let's have your contribution.
Thank you very much, Kalispera. I'm terribly sorry about this, but I'm chairing the Coroners and Justice Bill 2 doors down in the room that you ought to be sitting in. I'm afraid it's because of us in part that you're not there, you're here tonight, and I have to be in the chair at 7:30, so I will be very brief indeed. I also apologise to those of you who came to Margate for the Blessing of the Seas a few weeks back, because I'm going to repeat pretty much what I said then. Not a great deal, sadly, has changed. Peter said he was going to offer a ray of sunshine. I'm going to offer a ray of gloom. I have been watching the negotiations that have been taking place in Cyprus, the talks, with very great interest, obviously, and very great care. I have to say that while it is a very good thing that people are talking, it's always better to be talking than not talking. I see no great signs of any movement whatsoever. I cannot see that the property issues that have to be addressed before there is any settlement have been addressed. I cannot see that the settler issue that has to be addressed before there is a settlement has been addressed, and I cannot see that the troops issue has been addressed. Now, those are the three key issues that were missing at the time of the referendum. It has been said that successive governments, British governments, have failed you, and I believe that's true. I was deeply saddened that Prime Minister Blair, as Prime Minister, went to Ankara after the referendum and criticised the Greek Cypriot side for not saying yes, because that package was not a package that could be said yes to. It was as simple as that. It didn't answer the problems. I don't believe, actually, that the problems are going to be solved by the talks that are taking place now. Gerald Kaufman mentioned the importance of the United States in this, and I think he's absolutely right. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Gordon Brown, and President Obama are meeting in Washington probably as we speak now. I suspect that this issue will not be at the top of their agenda. Well, yes, they have other fish to fry, but I don't think anybody should be in any doubt at all that this is a very important issue indeed. The unresolved matter of Cyprus is a key to a lot of what is happening in the Middle East. This is a flashpoint that could take off at any time. It is an absolute scandal that there is a European Union country occupied by an army of occupation from an aspirant European Union member. And it really is as simple as that. The answer to this problem, I fear, lies in the hands of Turkey. And the answer to Turkey answering the problem lies in Washington. And unless and until, I believe, the President of the United States takes this, shakes it, grips it, and says that this problem has got to be resolved in the interests of world peace, then we shan't see the movement that we need. So, to summarise, I believe that those of us here in the House of Commons who have any interest, and clearly everybody here tonight does, have any interest in this issue, has a very clear duty, and that is to use such power, limited though it may be as we have, to bring to bear such pressure as we can upon our colleagues in both houses of Congress and upon the President of the United States to say this has gone on far too long, you have the real influence, time has come to solve it, solve it. Thank you
very much, Roger, for those very kind words. I do see a number of parliamentarians here. I'd like to ask anyone of you who wants to go next to raise their hand, because it really depends on your commitment. Lord Dobbs is here as well. Lord Dobbs, would you like to say a few words?
I only just walked in.
Okay, would you like to give us come and join us then? David Burrowes MP, Member of Parliament for South please do.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Peter, and it's a pleasure to be here. Can I welcome you all to tonight's meeting? Possibly a Member of Parliament since 2005, and naturally from the constituency of Enfield Southgate, quickly become in some ways having a level of experience in relation to Cyprus, which was helped very much by my visit with the Friends of Cyprus last year. in many ways, you are the experts, and I do hope that we're going to have some time to have some people to hear from you and what your view is of the present situation in relation to the talks. Peter alluded to the fact there's been many words spoken about Cyprus over time. So I must confess that I'm guilty of many of those words, and particularly in December, being able to speak in the debate on Europe, particularly reflecting on my visit. And I just want to spend a few minutes about that visit, which Angela also members of that delegation, they may want to add as well. Because in some ways there is a parallel world out there in terms of the response to the present situation and the talks. So certainly the official view and the view that we heard is very much a positive one, to rebut the gloom that was there. There's trying to be the ray of hope that Peter suggested, and that the positive relationship between President Christofias and Mr. Talat, and the dynamics there, and the fact that there have been those 20 meetings and the talks are continuing, the commitment to those talks, despite aggravation and provocation, to continue with those talks. And we heard that positive approach, that hope that people do want to see some solution, that in many ways the relationship that is there between President Christofias and Mr. Talat is a relationship that in many ways holds the best opportunity for a negotiated settlement. But then when I speak to my constituents, and no doubt hear from yourselves and others, there is an underlying scepticism about really whether this is going to bear any fruit, when we see the fact that many months have gone by when talking about power sharing arrangements, which was supposed to be the easy chapter, and then we move on to the very problematic and difficult area around property, and we haven't yet gone on to the issue of security yet, and the whole issue of troops. Then the scepticism is there, and there are grounds for scepticism. And I certainly did leave our visit in that sceptical mood, and all those many obstacles that are all too clearly seen, not least in the presence of the troops and the numbers of settlers that are there. But I do want to remain hopeful and optimistic, not least the fact that the talks are continuing, and I do want to do that. I have to counter that with the scepticism that I saw for my own self, and not least from going over to the north and with others going, for example, to the Maronite villages for the first time, and being able to see that Samatos and Marina effectively under the control of the Turkish military, and how desperately sad that is, that the community can't even go and go to worship, and that fundamental freedom is not available to the Maronite community. And then also, obviously, as has been mentioned before, but it came to me particularly evidently in terms of the lack of control when I was speaking to a very proud Nicosian Greek Cypriot, a councillor who was responsible for trying to restore parts of the city, that she, quite properly in many ways, doesn't feel able to go over to the legal crossing, because she herself does not want to show her passport. She thinks, why should I show a passport as a Cypriot, as a proud Cypriot? And when one talks about confidence building measures, the fact that those controls are in place can obviously show that there is a lot of reasons for people to be sceptical and to be concerned. But the abiding word that I get from those I spoke to in Nicosia and in the constituency, indeed, I remember speaking to some Turkish Cypriots in a cafe in northern Nicosia, and they themselves said to me how concerned they are about the prospects of a solution. They said to me that they only have to look at a recent headline that they had from Mr. Talat saying that he was concerned about what Ankara thought about his performance in relation to his re-election. And that said to themselves, they're concerned that in many ways the answer, whether there is going to be any reality to the hopes, is in Ankara. So taking all that back, I have had that sceptical view and then relayed that to the House, but nevertheless wanting to be optimistic, because I do see this as, in many ways, the best opportunity there is for a solution. But only recently my hopes have gone up again in some ways, and the curious place it's been is at a meeting that some of the delegation Friends of Cyprus went to, a meeting with the Turkish ambassador. Now, the reason I put forward to him that parallel concerns, that on one hand, yes, positive, we have these talks ongoing, but on the other hand, the reality that people think, well, frankly, is it really going to be delivered? Is there really the will to have a solution? And when we ask, well, pressure needs to be put on Turkey, well, I put to the Turkish ambassador that is there really the free hand to Mr. Talat? And he said in his words that there is the power and authority for Mr. Talat, and he tried to say, well, not least the fact that Mr. Talat now is going for early elections. He wants that mandate, so he has that clear mandate to be able to continue. And that's what the ambassador is saying. You may question whether the ambassador is speaking for the Turkish government, but he is seeking to emphasise to me, as a parliamentarian, the fact that, yes, there is that authority that Mr. Talat has. He also made reference to the European Union journey that they're on, a very long journey, which many think is going to be a very, very long journey. But he pointed out the recent opinion poll in Turkey that 65% of Turkish people are very much in favour of the European project, which has gone up in recent times. And whatever is one's view about Turkey joining the European Union, nevertheless, with them focusing on that journey, it is one that also should bear some fruit. But when it comes to it, there has to, with all these words of hope, there has to be a reality to it. And so I said to the Turkish ambassador, well, it has to be shown, doesn't it? For example, with those Maronite villages, those under occupation, under siege in many ways, and with troops controlling the movements of people into that, show that you mean it by just, in that example, as one amongst many, of removing the troops from there. And he did say, well, that is an area that we're going to be particularly looking at, but it's got to go further than that, and there's got to be a real reality to show that the sceptical views that I'm sure many of you have, whilst wishing well these talks, does really show some good faith. And that has to come in very difficult situations, but situations that are vital. And that is in the area of troops, it is in the area of property, it is in the area of security. And it's in the area around areas such as in Famagusta, that frozen village in time, where surely, if there is that goodwill, there should be progress made to show that, to allow, under the auspices, even if it's the European Union, that allow free trade to flow and allow people to return to their homes. And so, in contrast to Gerald Kaufman, I have an interest. I have a very profound constituency interest. But my interest isn't just simply concerning constituents, and many are here tonight. It is also because it's right. It's right for us to be standing up in the interest of justice. It's right for us to be standing up for those interests profoundly lost in lives and in property. And it's right because it is unacceptable that the beautiful island of Cyprus is divided as a member of the European Union, and an island that also has such a heavy military presence. So I'll continue to speak, Peter, in the House, and to add to those words, but also to do whatever I can to put pressure, whether it is on the Turkish ambassador, whether it is on Turkey, whether it is to encourage the signs of good interest from America through the advisors to President Obama, and also the visits recently of a senator, whatever way to encourage those hopes to reality, where we have a Cyprus that is united, but a Cyprus that's agreed by Cyprus for Cyprus.
Thank you very much, David. I would now like to ask Alan Meale, who's a very long-standing friend of Cyprus, a very good friend of our community, to say a few words.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Can I, first of all, it's not a very pleasant duty this, but we've lost another comrade, Linda Featherstone, who's died. A great supporter, always there, always arguing, and please, when you leave here today, just reflect that, if we could only just put a little bit of the effort that she did day after day after day, we would very, very quickly solve the problem of Cyprus, I believe. But it's another sympathetic message that we take back from here, that yet another soul has been lost before we actually get to the situation where we see a free and united Cyprus. Colleagues, can I just tell you some of the things that we have been involved with? Some of them cross-party, some of them at the moment are just with members of the Labour Party, but by the time we get round to the major meetings connected with it, it'll involve all parties. We're currently hoping to fix up a meeting with Joe Biden in June, July. That'll be in the United States, and there are moves being made in that particular direction.
We have already got a commitment from the EU Commissioner on Human Rights to both visit Cyprus and also to receive a delegation from the UK and Cyprus about the situation on the missing persons. We have also had meetings, a number of meetings with the Minister for Europe, and I'm happy to tell you that the monies which were needed for the Missing Persons Committee operated in Cyprus have been forthcoming from the UK government, and the Minister has given her assurances that her door is open for meetings with that committee, and also she has given her word that any future finances that are going to be needed from the UK government will be forthcoming, if it is needed at any time. And finally, just to say that only a week ago, John Prescott and I went to Cyprus for a day, landed in Cyprus, met the President, had a meeting the following morning, then came straight back to the UK. And he brought us up to date with the situation as regards the talks. And I agree with you that sometimes you can get terribly deflated about, some of the things which are going on at the present time. Still the arguments about property, still the arguments about whether it's compensation, whether it's not. I mean, the government of Cyprus has enough land, which it owns itself, that it can be put into this pot. If new houses are to be built, so people need to go into them, then let's get to that, and let's not talk about people keeping properties unless people want to sell them. But the right of people to return to their land and properties, that is a priority. It's not a question about anybody going to be made homeless or anything else. And any arguments that are being put forward by forces to the contrary, it's really quite rubbish, this. There is land there. There is money, if necessary, to be available. People can be given new places to live, but actually they can't keep properties that are stolen. That's the reality. It's the simple logic of all international law. And the second thing is on the missing persons. We have to be very, very careful. I'm very grateful to the present Minister for Europe in this regard. Some people believe that this committee has been working for some time now, and there's about 800 to 1,000 situations are being sorted out. And then that's fair enough, and it's time perhaps to slow the whole of that issue down and move away from it. No, no, no. Yeah. We have to continue until every single soul has been investigated in this regard, and we found out, and that includes the most despicable announcement statements that were only made just over a week, 10 days ago, by a serving Turkish officer at the time of the invasion, who admitted that he had personally shot prisoners taken under the terms of the Geneva Convention, had shot them because it was too much of a problem to have them shipped back over to the mainland. Now that's a scenario that has to be investigated. Not only those persons that are still missing and are buried on the island of Cyprus, but also those people who are buried on the mainland of Turkey, and the situation and circumstances what occurred in those jails for that to happen. We must also have a look at the whole of the relationship about what the solution is going to be, because we still argue about two separate identical states with occasional meetings once a year, or options for presidency every 2 years, and so on and so forth. It can't be that. What people have got to understand today is actually bizonal, bi-communal federation was a commitment from the government which moved over to bipartisanship in Cyprus. It wasn't. It was a concession. It was a concession. Here is a nation, a free nation, now a member of the European Union, a free brother, sister in our family. And yet we have a scenario here where people are still trying to have two separate independent states which meet occasionally on border issues to get a solution. That is not acceptable. We have to move away from that. And I have to say that President Christofias is doing a first-class job in this respect. When John and I went to Cyprus last week, we landed within 40 minutes, we're in the capital, and we're with him for 3 hours. 3 hours discussing this issue. He didn't just, and this was on the day that his father-in-law died. So he is given his all in trying to get to this situation. But comrades, colleagues, friends, the reality is there's still a heck of a long way to go. And we all have to keep active. I mentioned Linda right at the beginning of this. We all have to have the strength of her to try and deliver this issue. You know, we're in here today, and these bells are going to start going very, very soon, because this Parliament is deciding who's going to serve on select committees for the regions of England. Select committees about that. And we're going to be fighting, voting, and everything else. The truth about the matter is, out of the 600 and however many members of Parliament there are in this building, about 100 of them care about the situation in Cyprus. About 100. The other 500 plus don't. That's the reality. But they're willing to stay here tonight as long as it is necessary, it says on the whip, to vote for who might go on a select committee in their region for their party or the rest. We've got to change that. We've got to say, actually, there's a bigger issue out there than members of the select committee. We have comrades, allies, members of our family, which we've let down very, very badly over the last few years, that we have to find a solution to. I don't have many Cypriots in my community. I have about 72 families. I always say it's about 720 to get more funds towards their needs. But the truth is it's about 72 families. But it doesn't matter if I had 720 families or 72 of the rest. If I've got one Cypriot, then I actually have to be engaged. And more to the point, even if we haven't got any Cypriots, what about what Cyprus has done for us in the last 100 years? We haven't just occupied that because it was a nice place to go. It was very advantageous to Britain to be there. Cyprus, the watchtower of Europe, what very soon will be the gas station of Europe. The reality is, it's in our interest to be there. What about Cypriots in World War I and World War II? 40,000 of them gave their lives in those things for a free united Europe against fascism. What did they do when we needed their help in Kuwait? Well, the whole of the Ally launch for Desert Storm was from Cyprus. What about Iraq? When we needed their help there, and they went. There's some people in this room don't agree with the Iraqi invasion. Nevertheless, neither do Cyprus. Cyprus government is not committed on the international front to giving soldiers and airmen and sailors and the rest of it. But what they did do is give their allies support in Iraq and elsewhere, and they do it in Europe today as a member of our family. And what do? We look away. We look at the ground. We look in the air and we don't remember what it's done for us. What the government, the British government, my party and others' parties have done since 1960 in relation to Cyprus is an absolute thorough disgrace. That's the reality. They've let Cyprus down. They've turned away from it. They all say it's a problem over there and we're trying to help to solve it. But I'll tell you this, there will be laws passed tonight in this place, and this House will stand by those laws. There were laws in 1960, 61 and 62 in relation to the Cyprus Act, and we haven't been forthcoming, either as a deliverer of those laws or to being a family, friend and ally of our sister brother nation in the family of Europe. And I think it's got to stop. I think we've got to change it. We're not in the best situation at the present time, but we weren't 23 years ago when I entered this place. When I entered this place, with people like Tom Cox are still here, sitting in here tonight, and a handful of others that were fighting the good fight for Cyprus. We got that up to 135. Sadly, colleagues, we're about 100 at the present time. We have to reinvigorate ourselves. We've got to gird our loins ready for the battle ahead, and the thing which is going to happen undoubtedly in the next 12 to 14 months, a general election, and say to every single candidate of whatever party they belong to, will you support us on Cyprus? Because if you don't, you're not getting our votes. That's the reality of it. And after that, we're going to monitor you every single week in Parliament to see when you're asked if you're going to support the cause of Cyprus, freedom for our brother, sister nation in Europe, whether you're going to support the cause for unification. And if you're not, don't knock on our door. And I say this as a Labour Party member. I'm happy to report that many of my members, most of them, are okay on this particular issue. Some aren't. Some aren't in other political parties either. But people like we've got here, one or two of them are. Now I say this to you, it's going to be really hard because there are other items on the agenda. But we did it in 1987 and we can do it in 2010. The reality is we've got to do it now. We've got to do what Linda has done for all those many years, and we've lost her, as I said today. We've got to replace her. get ourselves ready, move forward, do the work, and deliver a free united Cyprus. Not hope on the whims of others, the solutions of theirs, but rather saying, we want for you what we want for ourselves. Comrades, we'll keep on trying our best. Thanks very much.
To see all members of the House of Commons there is a division in the House, and they're going to take a few votes that they promised to return. And I have the privilege now to have with me Lord Dubs, rush back to the House of Lords. So I'm going to ask Lord Dubs to say a few words, and you can say perhaps more words than you had in mind.
Oh. Do I need the mic or not?
I'm not sure.
Do I need the mic?
I don't think so, because that's for the...
Yeah, okay, okay, don't worry.
This is for me.
For you? Okay. Okay, first of all, good evening. We do occasionally have votes in the House of Lords as well, but not at the moment anyway. Look, can I say first of all, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to be here. I think I've been involved with the cause of Cyprus for a long, long time. I see Tom Cox, friend of mine, former colleague, no longer last in the Commons, and he and I were often engaged in issues to do with Cyprus together. But let me just tell you, as we've got a moment or two, first of all, I've talked over the years to many audiences of people from your community, and I have to say, you've got a real tenacity of purpose. You come along, you attend, you support meetings, you've shown a determination to stick with the issue when you might have faded away. I think that's a tribute to your community. And, you know, thank you, because it keeps some of us on our toes to know that you're on your toes. And you've been on your toes longer than some of us have, because it's your country that that's your origin, a country with which you have close ties, a country parts of which you've lost your homes in, and therefore you encompass the whole tragedy of the island of Cyprus during the time you've been here. So your pain is a pain that certainly many of us have felt through sharing with you meetings and events. Let me tell you how I first came actually to be involved with this. And you may think it's late in the day, but I first stood, well, I did stand for Parliament before, but I stood for Parliament in 1979. That's not, well, I'm a bit older than most of you, 1979. And during the election campaign in South Battersea, Tom was in the neighbouring constituency of Tooting, I was approached by some Greek Cypriots. And they wanted a discussion with me, and okay, in the middle of an election campaign you don't always have time, but this is actually what happened. And we had discussion, and they explained, I mean, I knew a bit about Cyprus, of course, but they explained to me what their position was, and they said to me, when you're elected, I thought if, but anyway, because I won by 300 votes in the end, but when you're elected, they said to me, will you take up the cause of Cyprus? Will you join the Friends of Cyprus in Parliament? Will you make sure that you learn more about Cyprus and that you will be an ally of ours when you get there? And I said yes, okay? And that was a promise I hope I've kept over the years. But it shows the virtue of lobbying. It shows the virtue of your approaching, and you all know this anyway, the virtue of your approaching politicians. It has to be of all parties, of course, because you may be living in constituencies that aren't Labour, but it shows the benefit of your approaching your local politicians, telling them about the facts as regards Cyprus, telling them what's happened to you, what's happened to your families, what's happened to your friends, and getting them as committed to the cause of Cyprus as you possibly can. Because Alan Meale talked about, you know, the numbers who were committed and the numbers who didn't know very much about it. And there weren't all that many Cypriots living in my constituency of South Battersea, but there were enough. But the point is, there were 3 or 4 who came to see me, and they made all the difference. And so it was, to me, it was a lesson in how to be effective in persuading people of important causes. And it worked. So, you know, it's the election coming next year. Good luck to you, because you're all going to do the same thing, aren't you? Aren't you? Yeah, of course you are. Of course you are. Now, I was on the delegation. Some of us went to Cyprus. I don't know how long ago it was now. About 3 months ago. 3 months ago. And you know, I've been there many times. But what we had this time was a longer walk through the Green Zone with some of they were British military, but they were working for the UN through the Green Zone. And, you know, it was still shocking to see buildings that had not been touched since 1974, to see the bullet marks on the walls, the machine gun bullets, to see the Turkish army posts. And they said to me, you can't take any photographs of the Turkish troops because, you know, they'll shoot you or something. I don't know whether they would, but certainly what they said was, the British, the UN officers, they said, don't do it, just walk through, don't use a camera and so on. I did take some pictures, but not whether there were any Turkish troops watching. But it was a sadness of seeing decaying buildings, the bullet marks, the destroyed buildings, the sense there's been a war there and the war's moved on, but the tragedy of that conflict still remains. And it was as symbolic of a divided Ireland as anything you can possibly find. Now, probably you haven't seen that. You can see it just about. You can look into it, but you can't see it all. And there were some motor car showrooms where there were motor cars that had been on sale in 1974. They were sort of collector's items or something, but, you know, again, 1974 was frozen and encapsulated in the way that for many of you, the events of 1974 are frozen in your consciousness. But here we saw it, and we walked through. I went to Famagusta. We looked through at the buildings on the shore there, all the buildings which are all fenced off. We could walk a little bit along the beach. This was on the Turkish side. We could walk along the beach, but of course we weren't allowed into any of that. So what I say is, a visit like that, first of all, it recharges one's political batteries. Because there's nothing like being there, talking to your president, talking to people, politicians, and seeing what goes on to make one more energetic. So it recharges one's political batteries. But it also brings back a reminder of why the cause is so important. A reminder, you don't need reminding, but for some of us who weren't, you know, who didn't go through the tragedy of 1974 and the continuing tragedy, for some of us it's important that occasionally we get a chance to go back to Cyprus and to, as it were, get ourselves up to date with what has happened. Now, just as parliamentary colleagues are coming back now from at least one of the votes, just say this. I personally, provided that they meet the conditions, I personally would not object to Turkey joining the European Union. You may be surprised at that. But there have to be two sets of important conditions. One of them is that Turkey must conform to European standards of human rights as well as anti-corruption and all the other standards which Cyprus had to achieve to meet the chapters to join the European Union. But the second one is, of course, Cyprus. And in a way, the more that Turkey wants to join the European Union, the more hope there is that there has to be an agreement, because they know, and we've told them. We've told the Turkish ambassador, we've told them, Cyprus has got to be settled in a way that meets the wishes of all the people of Cyprus, because otherwise your chance of going further, even in the negotiations, is nil. And already under some of the chapters, there are no negotiations because of this issue. So maybe the more that Turkey wants to join the European Union, the better it is for the future of Cyprus. So I'm a qualified optimist. I've been depressed over the years at times. I've been bitterly depressed. And I've met people like you who say, keep at it, keep at it. So can I finish by saying thank you for what you've done. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your engaging with us. Thank you for your help, and good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
We all sometimes think badly of politicians, either because they're in a particular party or another, but you're going to have to live with us tonight, because there's going to be a lot of votes. There's going to be a one almost immediately. There's going to be a lot to follow between now and 9:15. So you might get people who are here for a very short period of time before they have to leave. Some will go and not come back. But stick with us, it'll be all right.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. I'm delighted to see some new faces joining us, and I have next to me Lynne Featherstone, a member of Parliament for Hounslow Green, who is well, not a new face to me, but certainly a young face. A former colleague of mine, Hughes MP, I'm delighted that they're here, and proud to say a few words to you.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm going to say a very few words, because obviously coming from Hounslow Green, Cyprus is on my doorstep, if you like, and many people write to me all the time. I recognise some in the room. What what I need to understand is how do you make a difference? How do you take this forward in a way that will move things forward? Because all the endless questions, we come to the missing persons meeting, we stand there, we talk endlessly about how the properties have to be returned or compensated or whatever, but we never seem to really change hearts and minds to move forward in Cyprus. And I don't know, you have to tell me, Peter, what I can do more to move it forward, because we come to meetings, we speak, we talk. I think from everyone I've spoken to from the Cyprus end, what is wanted most is prosperity and a way forward, that to move away from the past, to be a united Cyprus, to move forward. And that's the thing I want to help with, but to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know what else I can do. You have to tell me. I'm here. And you, I have to say, don't lobby me very often. No, it's true. No.
We will now.
Well, we are from different political parties, but I'm sure that wouldn't stand in your way.
That in no way affects how I behave in relation to Cyprus.
But I am your MP. So if you were to email me more often...
We have tried to meet before.
I know, but you don't have to email me and say, Lynne, could you mention this? Could you put this question in? That's what I'm there for. But I need some guidance, because as an MP I have a million things to cover, and unless people direct me and give me the information just when it's needed, then I am happy to serve and move things forward. But that's how I can serve. There is no other way. I mean, I could stand here and talk endlessly, but that really wouldn't move us forward. So my short message to anyone in this room from Hornsey Wood Green is lobby me. Tell me what you want me to say, who you want to write to. I will represent every one of you faithfully every single time you contact me. Thank you.
I need to reply, because Lynne has said that I have lobbied enough, so I think it's important that I should set the record straight. I think, first of all, we will certainly lobby you a lot more now. But secondly, I mean, we have been trying for the last few months to get a dinner organised with yourself, Simon Hughes, and the Shadow Liberal Democrat Minister for Europe. And that is something that we have been trying to do for a while, and we haven't succeeded. So that has certainly been on my agenda, Lynne, because we are keen to develop the relationship with the Liberal Democrat Party further. So that is something that we would like to do very much. But thank you for being here with us tonight. And Andreas Papabridis, who is the Vice President of the Federation, is very keen to say something.
In reply to the question, what can you do? I can suggest something for you to do. You've got a couple of your own people in the European Parliament who are very, very negative on Cyprus, and I would like you to speak to them. And you can also tell them, as part of the trade, that this will affect your re-election unless they keep quiet, or at least be neutral on Cyprus, because they are really very negative on Cyprus. Well, I can give you the names. It's just a couple. Yes. But they are really very negative on Cyprus, and that damages you at the same time.
It's important to say to Lynne, because she does represent a constituency with thousands of Cypriot constituents, and I think it's vitally important for you to become more aware of the problem. So I think that what you have suggested, having these further meetings with us, which I think would be mutually beneficial.
What I would say is,
Can I add that we have as Greek Cypriots, we have no party. Our party is Cyprus. And very correctly, Mr. Taps said it, and we were with him not once, but quite a few times. We went with the late Mr. Mitsidis, and we were working for him all the time when everything was going against him, and he knew that he was going to lose. But we were saying that you will win, and we were going around Battersea helping him, because he is a true friend of human rights and then Cyprus.
I'm conscious that there will be another vote, and I know that the Shadow Minister for Europe, who I'm delighted to see is here with us tonight, Marc Francois, from the Conservative Party, somebody I've known, I've got to know in the last few years. And I'm delighted you're here with us, Mark. And could I please ask you to say a few words
if you please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I'll probably keep this brief just in case the bells ring again. But could I begin by saying I don't in any way wish to come between you and your own Member of Parliament. But I can vouch for the fact that almost since I got this job, you have lobbied me. And as have some of your colleagues, indeed, who I see here this evening. So I have been thoroughly pestered in the cause of Cyprus by you, and I can attest to that tonight. I think one of the few people, if I may say so, that beat you to it was my colleague Theresa Villiers. I think I'd had the job about 2 days when the first email arrived from Theresa saying, I need a little chat with you about, congratulations on your promotion, I need a little chat with you about Cyprus, from memory, or words to that effect. And so from my side of the House, Theresa has constantly, as you will know, represented this issue in the House of Commons very effectively, and I think before that in the European Parliament. And so her and her colleagues Roger Gale and David Burrowes have also made a number of representations to me, but I think it's fair to say that MPs from all parties have taken a close interest in the Cypriot issue, and that is quite right. From my perspective, I, along with David Cameron and William Hague, met with President Christophis when he came to Britain last autumn, and he very kindly gave David a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding, which we have looked at in some detail. Without wishing to betray a confidence, he said something which certainly stuck with me. He was talking about the delicate issue of property rights in the north, and I remember him saying, surely you as a Conservative will appreciate that private property is important. I'm a communist and I believe that private property is important. So he has a way of putting a point across, I say, which certainly stays with you. I think that this is an important issue. I think it is a complex issue. There's a great deal of history that lies behind this, and I've tried to educate myself with regard to some of the history, but this is a complex problem. It's not easily soluble, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. I'm encouraged by the fact that talks are underway. They have made, I think, some progress, but clearly much more progress is required if we are going to be able to come to the peaceful settlement that all of us would like to see achieved. From my point of view, I have been to Cyprus 3 times in the past, once when I served in the military and twice on holiday. I have never been in an official capacity, but as Peter knows, I am remedying that, and I will be going in an official capacity as my party's Shadow Europe Minister in April. So I'll be visiting the island, I hope, for 3 days, where I want to get a better feel for these issues for myself on behalf of my party, so that perhaps at some point in the future we may be in a position to help bring about a settlement. I think from a British perspective it is clear that we are in no position to dictate any kind of settlement. That is obvious. But perhaps, given our history, we are in a position to help bring about a settlement, to help try and find areas of agreement so that hopefully, finally, this very difficult problem can be solved. From a British perspective, I think we have a duty to try. On behalf of my party, I pledge that we will attempt to uphold that duty. And I hope that one day, it takes a braver man than I to predict a date, but I hope that one day, and I hope that that date is not too far away, we can finally see a free and unified and importantly prosperous Cyprus, which provides a great home for all of the people that live on that island within the wider home that is the European Union. I do hope, Chairman, that one day we can bring that about, and I hope that my party in some way can contribute to that eventual success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Mark, bearing in mind that you are Shadow Minister for Europe and that you are in the Shadow Cabinet, and of course we are entering a pre-election period, I guess, in the next year or so. And it's conceivable, I guess, in the light of the forecast that the Conservative Party may end up in government in this country, with or without the Liberal Democrats. I think I'm going to give the opportunity to our audience to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, please. The only thing is I do have to get away by just a little bit before 8:30. But
absolutely fine. So, if there are any questions for Mark, please, could you take them now? I think it's extremely important that we hear from Mark. If you have any questions. No?
Well, thank you very
much. What is the official position of the Conservative Party regarding Turkey's application to Europe?
Turkey's application to Europe?
Yeah.
As you will be aware, sir, before you ask the question, we have supported in principle Turkey's application to join the European Union. That is a matter of record.
I follow the second question. If President...
Well, hang on, I haven't finished the first one. Thanks very much, sir. But I dealt with Jeremy Paxman the other week, so I think hopefully I can deal with this. So it has been our position that we have supported in principle Turkish membership of the European Union. But equally, it is clear that there needs to be quite a degree of change in Turkey before we believe that country is ready to become a full member of the EU. So, while we have supported it in principle, there are a number of issues that need to be resolved before Turkey can join the European Union. And of course, no country can join the European Union unless all of the other countries agree. And that, of course, means Cyprus would have to agree as well. So it's not merely a matter of what our position is, it's a matter of the position of all the other countries in the EU, not less Cyprus itself. Now, your supplementary, please.
Is the Cyprus issue one of the terms that Turkey must meet before entry?
I think it would be very difficult to see Turkey enter into the European Union while this issue remains completely unresolved, not least for the reason I've just given, that Cyprus itself would have a veto. So it's difficult to see a set of circumstances, I think, even if you leave aside the British perspective for a moment, where Cyprus would be happy to allow Turkey to enter the EU unless there's some settlement to the Cyprus issue. So I think, even from a Cypriot perspective, I think it's fairly obvious what the response to that might have to be. So, as I've said, just to amplify, we are encouraged in one way by the fact that there are talks and that those talks are making progress. Perhaps they're not making as much progress as some people would like to see, but the fact that there is dialogue ongoing at the moment is encouraging. And when I was a young platoon commander back in the last century, one of the things the army taught me is you can study as much as you want, but there is nothing like going and seeing something for yourself. And so it's my intention in April to go to Cyprus to try and see some of these things for myself, and hopefully to come back better informed as a result. I hope that's a good answer to your question.
Mark, I'm just going to take one more question from Mark, because this is not really meant to be. It was just an opportunity because you're here.
No, that's fine.
So, Kyriakos Choupras, who's also...
Mr. Francois.
Yes, sir, we've met before.
Can you elaborate? Yes, of course. Can you elaborate on this term of complex problem with regard to the essence of the Cyprus question?
Well, if this problem were simple, then I suspect it would have been solved quite some time ago. I have been lobbied by representatives from both sides of this debate, as you would well expect, and both sides have given me a version of history, as it were, again as you would expect, from their perspective. And it's clear to me that history plays a great deal in this whole debate. There are two different chronologies in this, two different versions of history of what happened in Cyprus. All I would say is that if we are to achieve a lasting and permanent settlement for Cyprus, then that history cannot be forgotten, but equally, at some point, all parties concerned have to agree to look to the future. If it is purely a debate about the history of the issue, and everybody becomes totally absorbed with that, then unfortunately it may be difficult to go forward. I believe at some point all parties concerned have to look forward into the future and hopefully as a result of that be able to come to some agreement that will allow hopefully the island to be unified. That is what I have learned so far, but I make the point that I still have much to learn, and in that sense that's why I've offered to go and try and learn things on the ground. I hope that's an honest answer to your question. But I know you've got other people, colleagues who want to speak, and I don't want to squeeze anybody out, but thank you very much for allowing me to attend your meeting and to address you, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to answer at least a couple of questions. I'm very grateful to you, Chairman. Consider me long. That's all.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for Mark, I know you were planning to visit Cyprus, but we have been invited to come to the Federation headquarters for dinner as well, to go working dinner, and that's going to happen in
Indeed.
Theresa Villiers is very keen to go next, so Theresa, please, the floor is yours.
Well, I'd like to start by paying tribute to the work of the Federation on the Cyprus cause, not just for arranging the event this evening, but for its continuous hard work. And I too, like Mark, can assure you that I receive very useful and frequent lobbying, not just from the Federation, but from the Brotherhood as well, and of course from the whole spectrum of Cypriot political parties. As a Conservative, I enjoy a particularly kind of friendly relationship with the sister party to the Conservatives, Democratic Rally, but of course there are a whole range of Cyprus political parties that are united together in campaigning for the Cyprus cause, which is so important to me, and I'm delighted to work with them as well, right across the political spectrum. And as really, I think just looking back over the remarks we've heard from many speakers this evening, all united in their support for Cyprus. And it's the fact that Cyprus is an unresolved issue, which is a deep reproach to the international community. As Peter started the discussion by saying the current situation in Cyprus, and indeed the events that have led to this painful division, are a symbol of failure of leadership in the international community, and it is high time that that situation changed. And I am delighted to say that my party is committed to supporting Cypriots in their search for that much wanted solution for a just, lasting and balanced settlement of the Cyprus question, which sees Cypriots, whether they're Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, Maronites, and indeed the English, because there's a lot of them in Cyprus these days, living harmoniously together in a united Cyprus once again, with a single citizenship and a single international personality, a single nation once again. The proposals for separation are simply unacceptable, and it is high time that the laws, the international law, is complied with, and we see Cyprus reunited once again. And of course, as again a number of speakers have said this evening, the role of Ankara is pivotal in this situation, because it is only when Ankara, whether it's the government or the Turkish deep state or the generals, it's only when they let Cypriots have the freedom to shape their own future, to reach their own settlement, that's when we will have true freedom for Cyprus. That's when it will be possible to put together that settlement, which can be of such huge benefit to all communities in Cyprus. Peace is not a zero-sum game. It's not a question of one side up, the other side down. Everyone will benefit if we can finally solve this problem, which has been such a painful episode for Europe for far, far too long. And make no mistake, this is Europe's problem. Nicosia, of course, it's often said, but it's Europe's last divided capital, and that division is something that European leaders must be aware of, should be focused on, and certainly the part I try to play in the work alongside, of course, many others, particularly the government of Cyprus, but representatives here in the UK as well, to get Cyprus admitted as a full member of the European Union, at the top table of European decision making, I think was critical to the struggle to achieve freedom for Cyprus. And I'm proud of the role that I was able to play in that. And it's just a huge disappointment that as yet it hasn't yielded the dividend of a settlement. But rest assured that I and my colleagues in the Conservative Party and all your friends from other parties who are here tonight will continue in that quest to put pressure on our government, to put pressure on Ankara, and of course to try and put the pressure on the new administration in the United States, because again, as others have said, that is pivotal. If we are ever going to see sense from Ankara, if we're ever going to see the day when those troops start leaving Cyprus, the role of the United States is absolutely critical, because they are, the US government is always going to be listened to in Ankara. They have so much influence over Ankara, and it is such a source of disappointment and frustration that well over 30 years we haven't seen the Americans really focusing on the fact that there was a grave injustice done in Cyprus, which continues to this day, which sees people driven from their homes and still denied those homes over a generation later. And the real tragedy here is we see the generation that fled from their homes, many of them starting to die off, many of them are no longer here with us. And I think that is again a reproach to the international community and should motivate us all, whether we're parliamentarians in the United Kingdom or officials in the United Nations or officials in the State Department in Washington or those politicians in Brussels. We should all be making bigger efforts to see this settlement take place and to support Cypriots and give them the freedom that they need to reach that settlement, which will see them living peacefully together to the benefit of every single man and woman who lives in Cyprus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Theresa, for your kind words, which I appreciated very much. I'd now like to ask David Lepper, Member of Parliament for Brighton Pavilion and a long-standing friend of Cyprus, to say a few words. Unfortunately, David will be retiring from Parliament at the end of this term. So it will be a sad day when that happens, but nevertheless, I'm delighted you're here with us.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for that, those kind comments. Like one or two other speakers who we've heard from this evening, I do not have a large either Greek Cypriot or Turkish Cypriot population living in my constituency. I've got a number of people, but by no means a huge number of people. And for me, the issue of the future of Cyprus, the past of Cyprus, the present of Cyprus and the future of Cyprus is an issue of human rights and of justice, irrespective of any, I have to say, electoral considerations. But there is, of course, an election coming up this year for the European Parliament. And we have heard at various times throughout the evening of the importance of the European Union in the future of Cyprus because of Turkey's aspirations and because of the quite correct view that I think our government has taken and the government of the Republic of Cyprus has taken, that yes, let us have Turkey in the European Union, providing it meets the right criteria for membership of the European Union. So I think there is an opportunity for everyone here to make sure that in those European elections that are coming up in June, in your constituencies, Cyprus and the future of Cyprus is an issue to put to the candidates, to contact the candidates about, so that you know what they and their parties are saying about the issue and want to see as a solution to the issue. And it truly is, as others also have said, an issue which unites parties here in Westminster, irrespective of which government is in power. And in fact, Andy will bear witness to this with me, we have got 4 parties represented here on the platform tonight. We've got the Labour Party, we've got the Conservative Party, we've got the Liberal Democrats, and in the presence of Andy and myself, we've also got the 4th largest party in Parliament, the Cooperative Party. So you've got a 4-party coalition here working for the future of Cyprus. There are more than just the two of us, there's 29 altogether in the House of Commons. As Peter has said, I'm retiring at the next general election. When I came into Parliament in 1997, the occupation of Cyprus was 23 years old. And I really thought that the ending of that occupation and the establishment of the bizonal, bicommunal federation was something which I would see during whatever time I had in Parliament. I have a very sad feeling in here that whenever the general election is, whether it's this year or as many of us feel is perhaps more likely next year, the issue is not going to be solved by then. I look forward to the time when perhaps I might get invited back to an event like this here to celebrate the reunification of Cyprus and the establishment of Cyprus as that united country that we all want to see. There was a question that was asked, what's the essence of the problem? And well, yes, the essence of the problem is a complex one. I think about the essence of the solution. And I may be very simple-minded about this, but on the one hand, here is a very large country which wishes to join the European Union. At the same time, that large country is occupying a much smaller country which is already a member of the European Union. And, you know, politics can become complicated, diplomacy can become complicated, but how can it be right to say yes to Turkey being a member of the European Union when it is still and shows no signs of moving away from its occupation and bringing settlers in as well to a country to which it has absolutely no right and which is a member of the European Union? And I just think of a couple of contrasting examples of things. Some of you will have heard me say this before, and I don't really apologise for it. The year before last, I was in Larnaca. I hadn't been to Larnaca for a long time, and I hadn't explored Larnaca very much. And walking around Larnaca, I came across a mosque. And the mosque looked as if it was well used, and the mosque was clean, and the outside of it was clean. There was no graffiti over it. There was no desecration of any kind. My wife and I were able to go in and look from the door at the mosque, and clearly there had been people in there earlier in the day worshipping in there. Later that same year, I went for the first time to the north of Cyprus, to Morphou. And what did I see? Not only an occupied church, but a desecrated Greek Orthodox graveyard with the tombstones knocked over and graffiti everywhere. No sense of the sanctity of the place. What a contrast between the treatment that I'd witnessed as a tourist in Larnaca, in the south, in the Republic, of the religion of a minority group within that community, and what I saw there in Morphou of the treatment of the symbols of the religion of what I suppose was now a minority group in that community. The other example that seems to me to show something very different about ways of thinking about the problem is, I read in the news, there's a problem with energy in the north of Cyprus. What does the Republic do? It sends natural gas supplies to the north. Now, it seems to me there is something to be learned from those two issues about the approach to the problem. So, I hope that before too long, the dream that I came into Parliament hoping to see realised of that free and united Cyprus is realised. I don't think it will be, as Peter suggested, in my time in this Parliament. I hope it won't be too long after. I think, yes, the United States and the new administration in the United States, and perhaps especially the role of Hillary Clinton in that administration, is a very important one for the future. But I hope my colleagues here who are going to remain in Parliament after the next general election, and others who will be coming in for the first time, will keep in mind those three things about Cyprus that I always have in the forefront of my mind. That this government, whether it's Labour, Conservative, don't suspect it will be, but it may be a coalition, whatever it might be, has three loyalties to Cyprus. It is a member of the same Commonwealth of nations. Turkey isn't. The UK is a partnership, one of the guarantor powers. Turkey is, and we ought to be making Turkey, or we should in the past make Turkey recognise its role as a guarantor power. And the two countries, us and the Republic, are members of the European Union, and Turkey isn't yet. So I think we've got a threefold relationship with Cyprus that is special, and that whichever government is in power, we ought to have in the forefront of our dealings with those who would also like to join, not just being a guarantor power, but a member of the EU. I'm not sure that Turkey aspires to be a member of the Commonwealth, but who knows. So I wish you well in the fight. I will be with you in Parliament, taking forward that cause for as long as I am here, and I hope to continue taking forward the cause with you after I've left Parliament as well. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Mark has to go as well. Thanks very much, Mark. I'm delighted to welcome Simon Hughes MP, who is one of the sponsors of our event tonight. And thank you very much, Simon, for agreeing to sponsor our event here at the House of Commons. Simon is very well known to us. He's somebody who has worked with us for many, many years, and is almost invariably present in Trafalgar Square whenever we have our rallies, and we are grateful for that. I'm delighted that you're here with us, Simon. Please, could you say a few words? Oh,
thank you very much. I could either say a few words quickly, or shall I go and vote quickly?
Yes, if you... That may be better. Yes, sorry about that.
Lots of difficult questions.
I went to
good evening.
Welcome Tom Cox, who has been a member of Parliament for many, many years, as you know, and a vocal supporter of our cause. And Tom, I did want to ask you to say a few words, and now maybe the opportunity to do so, please.
Peter, dear friends, it's always a very great pleasure to come to these meetings, which, as speakers have said, are always so very, very well attended. We've heard some very interesting comments from members of different parties, and with much of what has been said, I agree with. But there are some things that I do not agree with that has been said here this evening. And the comment that Cyprus is a complex problem isn't something that sadly registers with me. The issue concerning Cyprus, to me, has always been very, very clear since I first went to Cyprus in October 1974. And it is, and still is to this day, the question of an invasion and occupation of a country. We've heard about meetings with the Turkish ambassador. Well, I'm not opposed to that. But I can remember meeting here in this house Ralph Denktash. And we all know Mr. Denktash was the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community for years and years. And Ralph Denktash here made his position very, very clear. recognise my state and I'll sit down and talk to you. That was the condition of Denktasch's involvement into what could have been an honourable settlement. Because I have to say to you, my friends, there is only one settlement that I would be prepared to support, and that is a settlement that sees the reunification of the island of Cyprus. There cannot be two states on Cyprus. And when we hear of the concerns of Turkey, well, I have to say, and many of you will have suffered deliberately from that invasion, I've never seen any evidence whatever of any meaningful willingness, negotiation on the part of Ankara that would have given us hope that there would be the kind of settlement we want. I can remember here having a number of debates on Famagusta and said repeatedly to Conservative ministers, to Labour ministers over the years, because as we all know there have been Labour governments and there have been Conservative governments here over the last 35 years. Let us see the willingness of Ankara to open up the town of Famagusta for the benefit of both Greek and Turkish Cypriots, and that would give the Greek Cypriot community and people like me a real belief that there is a change of heart in Ankara as to a settlement. But we all know, despite all the efforts that have been made by repeated mayors of the town of Famagusta, the support that presidents of the Republic have given to those efforts, we have never ever seen any meaningful progress on the part of Ankara, as we know they could, in reopening the town of Famagusta. Now, some of you I know will not go into the occupied area, and I can understand that, but I have been there. I've been there with colleagues and dear friends who are here this evening. And the occupied area of the Republic of Cyprus is, my friends, in my view, no longer Cypriot Cyprus, it is Turkish. Because they have changed everything about the area they now occupy. I can remember some 18 months ago when Doris had an exhibition of the desecration of churches and cemeteries. I've seen them with my dear friend Leon, who is sat over in the back there. You have to see it, my dear friends, to realise what has happened. And this has been done by Turkish troops, Turkish settlers, but it has certainly been done. And no longer is the area now occupied by the Turkish army and Turkish settlers any longer truly Greek Cyprus. When you go into the occupied area and you see the countless house development that is taking place, not just a few houses here and there, hundreds and hundreds of properties are being built. And what do we hear from the British government? Oh, well, we try to make clear that anyone who is buying a property tries to find out who owns the land. Where have we seen at any time, and I say and said when I was here as a Member of Parliament, Cyprus never received any support from Tony Blair. None whatsoever. I can remember, along with Rudy Vis, Alan Meale and others, having many meetings with Blair. Frankly, one wasted one's time going to see him because he just was not interested in doing anything to resolve the tragic injustice the Republic of Cyprus has suffered over the last 35 years. Now we have a new Prime Minister here, Gordon Brown. I'm waiting to hear Gordon Brown say very, very clearly where he stands as to the present Labour government's policy on Cyprus. I'm waiting, and Gerald Kaufman earlier this evening, and I've known Gerald many, many years. Gerald was saying what he hopes when eventually, if Turkey reaches that stage, when there will be a vote as to its possible membership, that Cyprus and Greece will oppose it. I want to know what the British government here in London will be saying. The efforts that the President of the Republic are now making is to be warmly welcomed, because he, more than anyone, must have known how difficult those negotiations were going to be. And whatever the Turkish ambassador may have told colleagues about Mr. Talat really has a lot of influence, he can make decisions, I don't believe that for 1 minute. It's never happened in the past, over the last 35 years, and I don't believe it's that position today. And what I want to see the British government and the British Prime Minister standing up and giving the kind of support that the President of the Republic of Cyprus, for the very reasons that Alan Meale outlined in his remarks here this evening. I want to hear Gordon Brown saying that publicly, what support he is going to give, and making it very, very clear to Ankara just where Gordon Brown, as the Prime Minister of this country, stands on the issue of Cyprus. We've heard about President Obama. I wish him well. I wish him well. But I, at times, after 35 years, have become very, very cynical. I remember Bill Clinton. Yes. I was in Washington on one occasion, and there were people who knew of my involvement with Cyprus who came up to me. They were members of the Congress and Senate, and they said, "Tom, have you heard the news today?" I said, "No, what's that?" "Have you heard who President Clinton has appointed as his special advisor on Cyprus?" I said, "No." Richard Holbrooke, the top negotiator here in the White House. Well, I have to say to you, my friends, he is now President Obama's special representative in Afghanistan. I hope he's got a bigger commitment to that than he ever had as President Clinton's special advisor on Cyprus, because not only did he do nothing, he wasn't in the position very long at all. So as always, it's a great pleasure to come here. And again, what Alan Meale said, you are the inspiration. Wherever you may live in this country, you are the inspiration for those of us who are deeply committed to Cyprus. And I beg you, as Alan said, there could be an election in a year or so. Put the pressure wherever you live on the candidates who will stand trying to be your Member of Parliament. Because, my friend, as long as I am able, I will always be with you to support Cyprus, and I wait, as I've said for you, for what is my agenda, the reunification of the island of Cyprus.
Thank you very much, Tom Cox, great voice for Cyprus, both within and outside Parliament. Rudy Vis is here, and he would like to speak next, and Simon has agreed, so Rudy, please.
Well, I have not been here for very long, so I haven't heard other speeches, and so I'm trying not to repeat. But I caught what Tom said, and it's quite interesting. When I was last in Cyprus, I asked the new chair of your, not Congress, House of Representatives. And he said there were 60 to 70,000 Turkish Cypriots. There were about 140,000 Turks living there. And of course, you remember Annan III. Now perhaps that was acceptable, but very perhaps. And then it changed to Annan V, which was totally biased, totally wrong. And you know, of the 140, and by that time there were apparently 120,000 Turks in the occupied territory, about 80,000 had voting rights. So they went around the world saying, you know, we voted for, and the bloody Greek separatists voted against. Yes, Turkey voted for. Now, I'm going with the Council of Europe to the United States in April. And we are going to meet, we were promised, Joe Biden, who is Vice President. And you may not know a great deal about Joe Biden, but Joe Biden was the chair of the Cypriot Foreign Affairs Committee, and he was also chair of the Greek, the Congressional Committee on Cyprus. Now, I also again listened to what Tom said about Clinton. Clinton promised, delivered absolutely nothing. Now, Clinton goes to bed with Mrs. Clinton, we all know that. Not every night, perhaps, but we all know that. We all know that. I just put that in to see how close they are. And the point is that she will listen. And I don't think it's going to come from Mrs. Clinton. And I don't think that if Mrs. Clinton asks advice or is given advice to the new president, and I agree with you, wonderful, wonderful person, very good with the public, and perhaps very, but will he ever attack Turkey? And that is the crucial point. I have served for 11 years on the Council of Europe and the Western European Union. There has never been, of any party from Turkey, there has never been a Turkish MP from any party who could take any criticism from anybody. And I don't want Turkey in the EU. Even if there wasn't a Cyprus crisis, even if there wasn't a Kurdish crisis, even if there wasn't a freedom crisis of being able to say what you, or being killed or being put in prison. And they're killing the PKK leader in a little island. And the only reason that they haven't killed him as yet is because they were subscribers to the Council of Europe when it started. And the Council of Europe when it started says, we don't have a death penalty. That is the only thing why they did not kill him. But they're killing him slowly. And it seems to me that Turkish membership ought not to be allowed. Never. Nothing to do with Cyprus, but put Cyprus in the equation. Nothing to do with the Kurdish issue, but put the Kurdish issue in the equation. We shouldn't. We shouldn't. It is a shame that we go through 35 years nearly, 35 years, of them waiting and seeing what they can get out of the occupied territory, and then they're 2 years maybe for membership and they give in. Now what politics is that? It is very unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rudy Vis, for that contribution. Simon, I started to introduce you earlier and you had to leave, but here you are again. Please, if you would take the floor. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much. It's very good to be with you. I was just reflecting as I was looking around the room that you're very patient people. You're very long-suffering. Yes. And some of you have aged very gracefully over all the years I've been meeting with you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry we've had to meet so often in these sorts of contexts, but I'm very happy to be one of the people welcoming you here this evening. And I am very conscious after, again, my Greek Cypriot friends have made longer speeches and listened to longer speeches than probably any other group of friends I've ever known. So I will try not to repeat what colleagues have said, except in two respects, and I just want to add a couple of other reflections. You are spared by the fact that at 9 o'clock the speeches must end, and I'm conscious another colleague may want a word. With other colleagues, I've been very preoccupied in recent months here by two other conflicts in two other parts of the world. One is in Israel and Palestine, and one is in Sri Lanka. And both have produced terrible deaths and terrible violence and terrible injury. Andy and I, for example, only yesterday and today have been talking again about Sri Lanka and seeing if we can get some wisdom in the government of Sri Lanka for the minority community in Sri Lanka, the Tamil community. And in Sri Lanka, as in Cyprus, we have been arguing all the time that there should continue to be one state, but one state where everybody has the right to self-governance and freedom, and that the basic rights apply. But the world doesn't always come to that solution. The world sometimes signs up to accepting the result of what has been forced on a country. When Britain withdrew its responsibility from the Indian subcontinent, it left Pakistan in two parts, East and West Pakistan. And then there was the Civil War, and now, as you know, there is not a one-state solution. For Pakistan, there is a two-state solution. It's Pakistan and Bangladesh. And in the Middle East, again, a British former responsibility. We haven't done very well around the world, I have to say, if you look back on the legacy of British occupation in leaving peaceful and calm and well-ordered arrangements. And the Middle East is another poor example. But there, the debate is all about a two-state solution. It could perfectly easily be a one-state solution. Because actually on the ground, Muslims and Jews and Christians and Arabs and Jews often get on very well in villages and communities. And so there's no obvious logic that there has to be a one-state solution or a two-state solution in any part of the world. It doesn't follow that just because it's an island it must be a one-state solution, and just because it's mainland, part of a bigger continent, it's a two-state solution. So these things always have to be battled for and fought for. And I've never wavered, Peter, as you know, in my view, influenced by having been, influenced by having had family living in Cyprus, influenced by the views of my parents about justice and the history before, that the best solutions for Cyprus is a one-state solution. Because the people of Cyprus, the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots, have been able to get on well and work together and be in communities together in north and south. And so I continue to work for that, as you do. And I'm encouraged, because although there have been terrible, terrible disappointments, the very fact that now there are regular, consistent and ongoing negotiations between two people who get on well and like each other and know each other well is actually the most encouraging thing you can have. Relationships, in the end, in politics, are more important than all the diplomacy in the world. If people get on well and can do business together, then there's a chance of progress. Now, the trouble with delivering is that, of course, every 2 minutes along the way, there are democratic accountabilities to take account of. There are about to be local elections in Turkey this month. So you're not going to, obviously, have Turkish parties and the Turkish Prime Minister, Turkish President as well, saying things that are going to be very sympathetic to the other side of the Turkish elections. And then, of course, next month we have elections in northern Cyprus, local elections, parliamentary elections as they call them. So we're probably going to have a bit of a difficult 2 months, March and April. But I sincerely believe that the opportunity is still great after that. And the best opportunity we probably ever have is coming in the months ahead, once the next 2 months are over. For a combination of 3 reasons, 2 of which have been touched on. I'm not naive about this. I don't believe that people are there. I don't believe it's all sorted. And I don't believe that there's not a lot of hard work to go. But the 3 things that I think militate in favour are, firstly, there is a European election this year for the European Parliament. And you do have a huge responsibility, as do other Cypriots across Europe, to put the issue of Cyprus in the minds of people standing and elected in June to the European Parliament, and then to make sure that they put it on the agenda of the new members of the Commission who will be appointed probably this year, but it might be deferred to election because of the Irish referendum, which is going to happen again. It may get put back. So that's an option. And you do, I absolutely implore you to make sure you go to all the people who declare their candidacy and all the parties, and don't forget it's a list system, it's a proportional system, so you need to speak to people at the top of the list and get them in London and beyond to sign. Secondly, the new administration in the States is, I think, a potential ally. Now, I remember, and Tom was right to remind us, typical Tom type way, that we've had terrible disappointments from the States. And they have not delivered. And they often don't deliver because they have their eyes on other balls. But they have the potential, they have the capacity. And the States have to be party to this because they're the only people who can really speak with strength. They're one of two groups of people to speak with strength to Turkey. And therefore we have to work really hard on your friends and families in the States. And we have to work really hard on our government to engage the American administration, to engage the President and the Secretary of State in the States and the advisors. And a lot of us need to do a lot of work this year when we go to the States and when we talk to the ministers who come here, members of the administration, to make sure it's on their agenda too, so that they can also be part of the peace process. And the third reason for the opportunity is that there are, for Turkey, opportunities that they are still actively pursuing. There has been movement in Turkey. They are seeking to accommodate the demands of the European Union. My judgment is that that could stall, that the heat could go off, that the prospect of Turkey joining could recede, that they could give up on that, and that the European Union could give up on them. It is in everybody's interest, I take a different view from Rudy, it's in everybody's interest that Turkey is incentivized to become part of the European Union, in my view, because a part of Turkey is in Europe, and because actually it would add a Muslim voice in Europe, which would be helpful to the credibility of Europe in its negotiations around the world. But those negotiations also are at a critical time, and this year there will be lots of detailed discussion. So there are three reasons why things could potentially go well. As I say, putting the next 2 months aside, which I think will be difficult. I think our job is to make sure, as parliamentarians, there will be an election by June next year, is to make sure, as Tom and others have indicated, that we, as Britain, keep on putting enough pressure that the Foreign Secretary of the day and the Prime Minister and the Ministers of the Foreign Office understand their historic responsibility as a guarantor power, as a fellow Commonwealth nation, as a former colonial governor, to be the lead party that delivers. Because if we don't push, if our government doesn't push, if we don't see it as our responsibility, then to be honest, we can't expect the Americans or the European Union or anybody else to. It really does require that. And so I hope that what we'll see over the next few months is real accountability to the Foreign Secretary and Ministers in the Foreign Office. And I agree with Tom and others. We need to make sure the Prime Minister understands his obligation. He won't be able to give it a huge amount of time. But if he puts it on the agenda at every EU meeting, if the Foreign Secretary puts it on every agenda at every Council of Ministers meeting, then there's some chance of some progress. So I'm optimistic that there is a way forward. We owe it to you to make sure that it's delivered. We owe it to you to make sure that it doesn't go down the agenda, way behind the other areas of conflict. And just this last thought. If we, the Europeans, can't resolve a divided nation in our continent, in our European Union, how can we go and preach to other people in other parts of the world to have a diplomatic, respectful rule of law in their countries? We really have to put our own house in order. And we have a collective European civilized responsibility to make sure that no armies, and no troops, and no invasions determine the democratic future of our peoples. Democracy has to work over the whole of Europe, not only a part of it. And if we can't deliver that, going to Afghanistan or Iraq or Africa is actually pretty hypocritical, and we have to make sure the government understands.
We have two remaining members of Parliament.
Only
And David Haynes and Andy. David, would you like to say a few words, please?
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, looking at you all, have you got my best side on? Yeah. Looking at you all, you're really ready for another 2 or 3 hour rant from politicians. As soon as they say they're going to be brief, they go on and on and on and on. But I am going to be very brief because Andy has kindly allowed me to speak first. I turned up 10 minutes ago in Committee Room 14 and they were talking about coroners. So I thought there's something wrong here. On Sunday, I was invited by the Greek community in Southend to a fundraiser. They're building a new church there, and they held, I bet some of you bought raffle tickets, and they organised a raffle for a new car. They sold 5,000 tickets. So that night, whoever drew the winning ticket was going to disappoint 4,999 people and please just one. So who do you think they got to do it? A politician. Now, as if we're not hated enough, that's what I did on Sunday. But a true story, Chairman, of course, it wasn't anyone at the social event who won the car, but the ticket had been sold to someone in North London. We got them on the phone and they were in floods of tears, really pleased that they'd won this new car. I would simply say that it was as a result of that gentleman's father, Harry Sophocles, that I got involved in this issue, inspired by that young man down there. He was too young to leave Parliament, wasn't he? Yeah. He was too young to leave Parliament. Yeah. And at an early stage, I was taken to Cyprus and saw at first hand the Green Line and how awful it was to see the abandoned properties there. So I would simply say that 26 years on, since I've been in Parliament, we've been talking about justice and peace for you good people, and I'm still waiting for it to happen. But I'm patient and I'm optimistic, as I hope you are. So I will continue to work with colleagues to achieve a just and peace settlement. End of the speech. Now,
Thank you very much, David, and thank you again, Simon, for being here with us today. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Well, Andy Love, Member of Parliament for Edmonton, needs no introduction from me, really. He has been a very long-standing and very supporter of the Cyprus cause for many, many years. And I'm delighted he's here with us, and he's our last speaker of the evening. So, Andy,
can conclude the meeting.
How long have I got? I'm minus 3 minutes already. Well, look on it this way. I've been here nearly as long as you have, and I'm wilting, so I do feel for all of you here tonight. It's been a long evening, and we've had a lot of speakers. I want to first of all disagree with all those speakers who said that they have very few Cypriots in their constituencies, because I have a very large number of Cypriots, both Greek Cypriots and Turkey Cypriots in my constituency, and I think probably it's between myself and David Burrowes in next door Southgate as to who has the largest Cypriot community. And one of the great joys I have is when I go to Cyprus, I can always say when I meet parliamentarians there, I've got even more Cypriot constituents than you have. So it's always a joy. I have to start with an apology. I'm not sure whether it happened. It certainly didn't happen while I was here, but I did run into Joan Ryan much earlier on, who tonight has her Air and Sea Cadets from Enfield in Parliament here, and they're meeting John Hutton, the Defence Minister, so they'll all be able to ask that. I suspect they'll be a really tough audience for John Hutton, but she did ask me to specifically say how sorry she was that she wasn't able to be with you, but to reassure you that she remains committed to the issue of Cyprus and to finding a solution and to playing her part along with other parliamentarians. I wanted to just, when I came through the door earlier on tonight, who was I greeted by but Gerald Kaufman. And I wanted to say what a great thing it was to see Gerald here tonight, because I go back long enough. I fought my first election, losing, in 1992 in the Edmonton constituency. And Gerald Kaufman came twice during that election campaign to speak specifically about Cyprus. I'm sure Gerald mentioned, I didn't hear his words, but I guess he would have mentioned his very, very long association with Cyprus. But what I want to pay credit to here tonight was the continuity. What Gerald did in 1992 was to raise Cyprus up the Labour Party's agenda. And he passed that on to successive shadow foreign secretaries, but perhaps he had the closest relationship with Robin Cook. And the great thing, and I want to pay particular credit to Gerald Kaufman, the great thing that they did, and I was, in a sense, a very small bit player in this as it unfolded, was to come through with reasons as to why we should be getting Cyprus into the European Union. And many people have mentioned tonight the importance of the European Union going forward, and I wouldn't like to underestimate the role that Gerald, it's often Robin Cook that gets the credit for it, but I can assure you that the genesis of the desire for Cyprus to join the European Union in Britain's government really rests with Gerald. So I'd like to pay tribute to him for that. I want to say, people have been relatively pessimistic, and I think it's always the wise course with Cyprus, having gone on for such a long time, never to be too optimistic, because we've been here before. But I'd like to join Simon Hughes in being just a little optimistic about the situation. And I say that for a number of reasons. First of all, in relation to what is happening on the island itself. Because we have a president, regardless, I'm sure, in many people's eyes, they disagree to a great extent with his political point of view. But we have a president who made it the centrepiece of his election campaign, who has made it the sole thrust of his government to pursue the peace process to a conclusion. And I think that has not been something that we've seen in Cyprus before, and I think it's something that we should all hold on to in these difficult times as we move forward. On the other side, we have Mr. Talat, and many people have commented on the real pressures he's under from the Turkish mainland, from the army, and none of which I would want to demur from. Undoubtedly, he doesn't have full control over what happens in the north of the island. He is very much subject to the whim of whoever the Turkish army leader is, or whatever instructions are coming from Turkey. But he is the interlocutor in the negotiations. There is, as I understand it, a very good relationship personal relationship between Mr. Talat and President Christofias. I understand that Mr. Talat attended the funeral of the President's father-in-law as a signal of the close, friendly relations there are between those two personalities. Now, I would be wrong, entirely wrong, to suggest for a second that two close personalities makes a solution. Of course it doesn't. And we know the problems that there are. But what this does is it gives the opportunity for Cyprus to say, we're for a solution, what about the rest of you? And it's really that I want to concentrate on. It's the role that everyone else should be playing to allow Cyprus to fulfill the destiny that those two leaders of the two communities are trying to put together. Now, I would love to be able to tell you that Britain was doing more than it actually is doing. Although I would want to say to you, in all honesty, that I think the appointment of the new Europe Minister, who has responsibility for Cyprus, the 2 visits that she's made, one literally within days of her becoming the Minister for Europe, have, I think, created a good atmosphere. This, of course, follows on. I won't go into the history, and we all know the history of the real difficulties following the referendum campaigns between Cyprus and the United Kingdom. But her appointment follows on the memorandum that someone commented on earlier on, which I do think has created a new atmosphere. And what we need to do is to build, and this is where your friends in Parliament come in, we need to build on that relationship. I was interested to see, for example, that as the Minister for Europe, she came out very publicly, only days ago, suggesting that Turkey needed to play a much more active and positive role in the peace process. Now, that's not a remarkable thing to say. We've been saying that for years, but it's interesting that it's said by a British minister and the minister responsible. And I do think that if we can build upon that, and I commit myself, and I'm sure all the other parliamentarians that we've had on the top table here tonight also commit themselves to pushing our minister to do more, to say more. Indeed, I asked her only 2 weeks ago, when she was going out to the region, when she was visiting Cyprus, would she take the opportunity to also go to Athens and Ankara, but particularly Ankara, to say, I've seen a very positive start to things in Cyprus. How about everyone else who has a very central role in this, playing their part, and of course Turkey in particular. And what I would really want them to do in relation to this is, and others have mentioned this before, confidence building measures are critical to moving the debate and the discussions and the peace process forward. And that's of course not been, I think there was great hopes when the discussion started, they've been somewhat blunted. If we're going to get a new momentum going, then we need to see confidence building measures emerging that will signal, not just to the 2 communities on the island, but more importantly, internationally, that things are moving and that the international community needs to get behind them. And let me just give you an example of that. Simon mentioned about Sri Lanka, you will probably all be aware, I don't want to dwell on it, but I take, and Simon takes a very big interest in this. And they're now just at the tail end of a very acrimonious and destructive civil war. And we've been trying to move things in a more peaceful direction. And I went to see the minister, a different minister in the Foreign Office who's responsible. And he said, the international community won't do anything because the 2 parties on the island won't speak to each other. We need them to speak to each other in order that we can move the process forward. Well, they can't say that about Cyprus. Everybody on the island is committed to the process. We need the international community. So Britain must play its role. Everyone else has mentioned the United States. Of course, that is the key. I got up in the House and said to the Minister a few weeks ago, how about giving Hillary Clinton a quick win? We all know they're not going to solve the Israeli-Palestine issue soon. In fact, if I'm being honest, Nat, 8 years from now when Obama will probably come to the end of his tenure as president, I don't think many people would suggest he'll have resolved that particular thorny issue. And there are of course others, problems with Russia, problems in other parts of the world, Pakistan and India, we know them all. None of them subject to easy resolution. But they could have a quick win. They could have a quick win. Because in Cyprus, the solution is there to be made. What it needs is somebody to apply the pressure. And the only people that can apply the pressure are the United States. Which brings me finally, and I'm sorry to have gone on so long, finally to Turkey. We all know the key lies in Ankara. They're not engaged in the process at the moment. Every time I meet ministers, I say, Minister, when are we going to get Turkey engaged in the process? If you look back to the failures at the stage of the referendum last time round, in my view, and looking as objectively as I can, why it failed was because Turkey came in at the end and demanded the whole thing change, demanded a complete new set of conditions, demanded that they were taken into account. They never got involved through the process. They only come in at the end, and it would be folly to make the same mistake again. We need Turkey to be engaged. We need the British government through the European Union to apply pressure. We need America to apply pressure. I'm told that this is on the agenda for discussions between the Secretary of State and the Foreign, David Miliband, representing the Foreign Office. This is on their agenda. But the reality is, and I come back to the point I made at the beginning to finalise, in my view, the European Union is where the pressure can be put. There is no doubt, no matter what people said in this top table, that there are conditions for Turkey to join. I won't list all the ones within Turkey about human rights, about the deep state, about the Kurdish difficulties. Let me just mention that Cyprus has to be resolved. And as a goodwill sign to that, they have to allow Cypriot shipping to land in Turkey. That's the first sign, but it's only a precondition. We have to have Turkey come on board, not just with Cyprus, but with human rights and all of the other issues. And if we can do that, I happen to be one of those, I suspect I'm not very popular in here, I happen to be one of those that thinks that Turkey has a future in Europe. But it's not a future of the kind of Turkey that we've seen recently and in the past. It has to be a new Turkey for Europe. And if we can create that new Turkey, then I think that holds the key to solving the Cyprus problem.
Many thanks, Gerald, and thank you very much for your work in Cyprus over many, many years. I was about to conclude, but Rudy says that he's got something urgent that he'd like to share with us very briefly, so I will give him...
It will only take a minute. I was listening very carefully to Andy, and there is something wrong with his analysis. On the one hand, he says, the key lies in Ankara, and that's a country. And on the other hand, he said, we need to help the discussions between your president and Talat. Talat is a mouthpiece. He counts for absolutely nothing. You should insist that your president, a country's president, a member of the EU, speaks to the president of Turkey. Nothing else will do. And there is where we have been staying and staying for years, and we ought to stop it.
We need Britain to
I won't detain you any longer, but just to say I fundamentally disagree with that.
We need Britain to put pressure on Turkey.
I think I'm not going to say anything much really. I think that you have been very patient, and it's now nearly coming up to 9:30. And I know that you haven't really been able to contribute as much to this debate. That is partly to do with the fact that we've had so many parliamentarians joining us today. But I do want to thank all of the parliamentarians who have joined us and all of those who have sponsored this event